A pregnant wife standing on the precipice of losing everything. A wealthy, arrogant husband, so brazen he decides to bring his mistress into the heart of their home for dinner. And a powerful matriarch, the keeper of a century-old dynasty, watching it all unfold. They all gathered in the grand Beaumont mansion for a meal that was meant to solidify a new, shocking reality. But no one, especially not the cheating husband, could ever predict the twist that was coming. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a story of karmic justice served on a silver platter, proving that when a woman is pushed too far, the fallout can bring an empire to its knees. The Beaumont estate wasn't just a house. It was a testament to endurance, a sprawling Gothic revival monolith of granite and ambition on the coast of Maine. Its stone walls had weathered a century of Atlantic gales, family scandals, and the quiet, relentless march of time. For Alina Beaumont, 7 months pregnant and walking its polished halls, it often felt less like a home and more like a museum she was allowed to temporarily inhabit. The portraits of stern-faced Beaumont ancestors with their cold, oil-painted eyes seemed to follow her every move, their silent judgment a constant companion. Her husband, Eric Beaumont, wore the legacy of the estate as casually as he wore his bespoke suits. He was the sole heir to the Beaumont fortune, a fact he never let anyone, least of all Alina, forget. They had met in college, he, the charming, magnetic scion of an empire. She, a scholarship student of art history, with a quiet fire and a laugh that had for a time seemed to genuinely enchant him. He had pursued her with a single-minded intensity that felt like a fairy tale. He'd swept her away from her world of textbooks and part-time jobs into a whirlwind of charity galas, European holidays, and eventually this very mansion. But the fairy tale had begun to fray at the edges, the gilded keynotes revealing its bars. Eric's charm had curdled into a possessive arrogance. His attentiveness had been replaced by a dismissive coolness, his phone now a locked fortress he guarded with a dragon's ferocity. Alina wasn't naive. She saw the late nights disguised as client dinners, the scent of unfamiliar, expensive perfume clinging to his shirts. The sudden extravagant gifts that felt more like hush money than tokens of affection. The pregnancy which should have been their shared joy had only widened the chasm between them. For Alina it was a miracle, a tiny fluttering life that gave her purpose within the echoing emptiness of the mansion. For Eric it seemed to be an inconvenience, a tether to a life of duty he was actively trying to escape. The true power in the Beaumont estate, however, did not lie with Eric. It resided with his mother, Bella Beaumont, a woman carved from the same unyielding granite as the mansion itself. Bella was the matriarch in every sense of the word. Widowed for a decade, she ran the family's foundation with an iron will and a shrewdness that had doubled its endowment. Her approval was the sun around which the entire Beaumont world revolved. Bella's relationship with Alina was one of cool, formal observation. She had never openly disapproved of the marriage, but she had never fully embraced Alina either. Alina felt like a specimen under Bella's microscope, constantly evaluated and found wanting. Bella valued lineage strength and an unspoken understanding of the burdens of wealth. Alina, with her middle-class origins and gentle disposition, was an anomaly. Bella treated her with a detached politeness that was in its own way more unnerving than open hostility. The storm that had been brewing for months finally broke on a Tuesday afternoon. Alina was in the sunroom sketching the winter bare trees in her journal, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Eric strode in, radiating a nervous energy that was unusual for him. "Alina, we need to talk," he said, not meeting her eyes. He paced in front of the large bay windows, a caged predator. "I'm right here. Eric," she said softly, her pencil stilling. He took a deep breath, the kind a person takes before diving into icy water. "I'm having a guest for dinner on Friday." "Okay," Alina said slowly. "Someone from work?" "Not exactly." He finally stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression a strange mix of defiance and something that might have been a flicker of guilt. "Her name is Chloe, and I want you to be welcoming." The name meant nothing to her, but the tone meant everything. It was the same tone he used when telling her he'd bought a new sports car without discussing it, or that he'd be spending a week in Aspen with the boys. It was the tone of a decision made with no room for debate. "Who is Chloe?" Alina asked, her voice quiet but firm, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. Eric ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "She's a friend, a very important person in my life, and it's time she was formally introduced to the family." The family. The only family who would be there was Bella. She always dined with them on Fridays. The implication hung heavy and suffocating in the air. He wasn't introducing a business partner. He was making a statement. "You're bringing another woman into our home for dinner, with your mother present." Alina's voice trembled slightly, not with weakness, but with a surge of disbelief and fury. "While I am carrying your child?" "Don't be so dramatic, Alina," he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "This is the modern world. Things are complex. I'm just trying to be honest and integrate the important parts of my life. I thought you'd appreciate the transparency." The audacity of it stole her breath. He was packaging his infidelity as a progressive virtue. He was daring her to object, to play the part of the hysterical, scorned wife he so clearly saw her as. He was counting on her to be meek, to swallow her pain and humiliation for the sake of a peaceful dinner. And your mother Alina pressed her heart, hammering against her ribs. "Does Bella know the nature of your friendship with this person? Mother is a woman of the world. She understands that men of my stature have certain needs," Eric said, with staggering self-importance. "She will understand. All you have to do is be civil. For one evening." He didn't wait for her answer. He turned and walked out, leaving Alina alone in the sun-drenched room, the cold reality of her situation washing over her. Her husband was not just cheating on her. He was preparing to replace her, and he was planning to do it right in front of his mother, using the hallowed tradition of the Beaumont Friday dinner as his stage. For a moment she felt a wave of despair, so profound it threatened to drown her. She could pack a bag, leave the oppressive mansion, and the man who so clearly despised her. But then she felt a tiny, determined kick from within. It was a reminder. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the future of her child, a child who was half Beaumont, a child who had a right to the legacy Eric was so carelessly trying to discard. A new feeling began to smolder beneath her pain resolve. Eric expected her to crumble. He expected her to make a scene or shrink into the background. She would do neither. She would attend this dinner. She would face this woman. She would sit at that table with all the dignity she could muster. She would let Eric play his hand, and she would let his mother, the formidable Bella Beaumont, see her son for exactly who he was. The 3 days leading up to Friday were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Eric acted as if he had bestowed a great kindness upon Alina, floating through the mansion with an air of unburdened relief. He was polite, almost cheerful a man, who believed he had cleverly solved a complex emotional equation. He discussed wine pairings with the cook and instructed the staff to use the best silver, the Waterford crystal, the heirloom china. He was preparing for a royal visit, not an execution. Alina, in turn, retreated into a state of calm that unnerved him far more than tears would have. She spoke when spoken to her, replies measured and polite. She took long walks through the frosty gardens, her hands cradling her belly, drawing strength from the tiny life within. She spent hours in the vast library, not reading, but simply sitting, surrounded by the weight of 100 years of Beaumont history, feeling its power seep into her. She was a queen, preparing for a siege fortifying her own spirit. She called her sister a pragmatic lawyer who lived 3 states away. "Just get out," Alina, her sister Sarah, had pleaded. "Take a bag and walk away." "You don't need this." "I can't," Alina had replied, her voice steady. "Not yet. There's more at stake than just my pride. He wants to erase me. He wants to erase this baby. I have to see this through." On Friday evening, a heavy, expectant silence fell over the estate. A fire crackled in the great hearth of the main hall, its flames throwing dancing shadows on the stone walls. Bella Beaumont arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, as she always did. She was dressed in a tailored navy blue dress, her silver hair coiled in an impeccable chignon, a triple strand of pearls at her throat. She was the picture of old money elegance and unassailable authority. She greeted Alina with a cool peck on the cheek. Her sharp, intelligent eyes swept over Alina's simple but elegant maternity dress, a deep emerald green that brought out the color in her eyes. "You look well, Alina," Bella said, her voice neutral. It was impossible to tell if it was a compliment or a mere statement of fact. "Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you, Bella. You look lovely as always." Eric, resplendent in a charcoal suit, bounded over to kiss his mother's cheek. "Mother, so glad you're here. We have a special guest tonight, someone I'm very keen for you to meet." Bella's gaze shifted to her son, and for a fleeting moment, Alina saw a flicker of something disappointment, resignation in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual inscrutable mask. "Oh," was all she said. The doorbell chimed its resonant sound, echoing through the cavernous hall. A hush fell. Eric's face lit up with a triumphant smile. The house manager, a stoic man named Peterson, moved to open the grand double doors. And then Chloe entered. She was everything Alina was not. Where Alina was understated elegance, Chloe was breathtakingly overt. She was tall and slender, poured into a crimson dress that was both expensive and daringly low-cut. Her blonde hair was a cascade of perfect sun-kissed waves. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat. She smelled of Dior and ambition. She paused in the doorway, framed like an actress on a stage, her eyes scanning the hall and its occupants with a practiced, confident sweep. This was not a woman stumbling into an awkward situation. This was a predator who had come to claim her territory. "Eric, darling," she purred, gliding towards him. She ignored Alina and Bella completely, her focus locked on Eric. She kissed him, not a polite peck, but a lingering, possessive kiss right there in the hall of his family home. Eric, far from being embarrassed, seemed to preen under the attention. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. Chloe, my love, you made it." He then turned a king, presenting his new queen. "Chloe, this is my mother, Bella Beaumont, and this is my wife, Alina." He said the word wife as if it were an unfortunate but necessary legal term, like plaintiff or defendant. Chloe's bright blue eyes finally landed on Alina. They swept down to her swollen belly and then back up to her face, a flicker of smug victory in their depths. She extended a perfectly manicured hand, her diamond rings catching the firelight. "Alina," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you. Eric has told me so much about you." The condescension was a physical blow. Alina felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she met Chloe's gaze without flinching. She took the offered hand. It was cold despite the warmth of the hall. "Chloe," Alina replied, her voice even. "I wish I could say the same." A beat of silence. Chloe's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Point to Alina." It was Bella who broke the tension. She had been watching the entire exchange with the silent, unwavering intensity of a hawk. She hadn't moved a muscle. Now she took a step forward. "Miss!" Bella's voice was crisp, cutting through the thick atmosphere. She didn't offer a name, forcing Chloe to provide one. "Day." "Chloe." "Day," the woman replied, turning her dazzling smile on the matriarch. "It's an absolute honor to meet you, Mrs. Beaumont. I've heard that you are the true pillar of this family." "I am the matriarch of this family, Miss Day." Bella corrected her gently, the distinction clear. "A pillar supports, a matriarch rules. Welcome to my home." The subtle emphasis on my home was not lost on anyone. Not on Alina, who felt a tiny unexpected spark of hope. Not on Chloe, whose smile faltered for a second. And certainly not on Eric, who quickly tried to regain control. "Well, now that we all know each other, shall we move to the dining room? I've had Chef prepare the duck à l'orange. You love so much, Mother." He steered Chloe towards the dining room, one hand possessively on the small of her back. He had placed her on his right, the seat of honor traditionally reserved for his mother. Bella was to be seated on his left, with Alina placed directly opposite him, a spectator to his newfound happiness. The seating arrangement was a deliberate, calculated insult. As they walked towards the magnificently set table, shimmering under the light of a crystal chandelier, Bella fell into step beside Alina. She placed a light, cool hand on Alina's arm. "Breathe, child," she whispered, her voice so low only Alina could hear. "Hold your head high. You are a Beaumont. Remember that." It was the first time Bella had ever referred to her as such without reservation. It was a small thing, a handful of words, but to Alina it felt like being handed a shield and a sword. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked into the lion's den. The battle was just beginning. The dining room at the Beaumont estate was designed to inspire awe and intimidation. A long mahogany table polished to a mirror shine stretched beneath a colossal crystal chandelier. The walls were lined with dark brocaded silk, and a massive unlit fireplace stood at one end, a cold mouth in the opulent room. Tonight, every surface gleamed, reflecting the candlelight and the tense faces of the 4 people seated at the table. The meal began with a suffocating civility. The clinking of silver against china was the only sound for long stretches. Eric, determined to create a facade of sophisticated harmony, steered the conversation to safe impersonal topics: the stock market, a new art exhibit in the city, the weather. He directed most of his comments to Chloe, who would respond with bright, animated laughter, often touching his arm as she spoke. It was a performance for an audience of two. Alina ate slowly, methodically, focusing on the taste of the butternut squash soup, the texture of the bread. She kept her eyes on her plate, refusing to be drawn into their charade. She could feel Chloe's gaze on her, sharp and assessing. She could feel Bella's presence beside her, a silent, powerful weight. It was Chloe who fired the first shot. "This house is just magnificent, Eric," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "It has such history, such a sense of permanence. It must be wonderful to know that this will all be yours one day." She glanced at Bella. "No offense, of course, Bella. I hope you live for 100 years. Bella simply smiled, a thin, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. The house has its own ideas about who it belongs to. Miss Day. It has a way of choosing. Eric laughed, oblivious to the undercurrent. "Mother is being poetic. It's my birthright. Simple as that." He beamed at Chloe. "And I can't wait to share it with the right person. To fill these old halls with life again, with laughter and parties, a new energy." The implication was clear. Alina, in her quiet pregnancy, was the old, stagnant energy that needed to be cleared out. Alina placed her fork down gently. "The house doesn't seem to be lacking for life, Eric," she said, her voice calm and level. She placed a hand on her belly. "There's a new life coming to it in less than 2 months." Chloe's smile faltered. She shot a look at Eric, an unspoken command to handle this. Eric cleared his throat, annoyed. Yes, of course. The baby. But that's a different kind of life. I'm talking about a vibrant social life. The kind of life we used to have, Chloe. Remember those benefits in the Hamptons? The galas. He was speaking as if Alina wasn't even there. How could I forget? Chloe sighed dramatically. We were the toast of the town. You need a partner who can stand with you in that world, Eric. Someone who shines. She looked directly at Alina. It's a demanding role. Not everyone is built for it. The insult was so direct, so brazen, it made Alina's ears ring. This was what Eric wanted. A public humiliation. He wanted to show his mother and Alina that Chloe was his future, the woman worthy of the Beaumont name. Before Alina could respond, Bella spoke, her voice like the chime of a frozen bell. My husband, Robert, she began, her eyes distant, fixed on a portrait at the far end of the room. It was her late husband, a handsome man with Eric's charm and a shadow of weakness in his eyes. Robert also enjoyed a vibrant social life. He believed a man of his stature was entitled to certain companions who shined, as you put it, Miss Day. The table went silent. Eric shifted uncomfortably. He hated when his mother talked about his father's well-known infidelities. Mother, I don't think this is the time. Bella ignored him, her gaze now pinning Chloe to her chair. He brought one of them here once, to this very table. A young woman who also thought she was the future of the Beaumont family. She was very beautiful, very charming, and very, very foolish. She mistook my husband's weakness for her own strength. Chloe paled slightly. I'm sure that's not. He spent a fortune on her. Bella continued, her voice relentless. Almost bankrupted the family foundation his grandfather built. Because he was so focused on what shined that he forgot what was of value. He forgot that a legacy is not built on parties and sparkling women. It is built on substance, loyalty, and sacrifice. Things that do not glitter, but endure. She paused, taking a slow sip of water. Her eyes, cold and clear, moved from Chloe to her son. "You are so much like him, Eric. I had hoped you would inherit my strength, but you have inherited all of his vanity, and none of his charm." Eric's face, which had been smug and triumphant, was now flushing with a deep, angry red. "That's not fair, Mother. This is different. Chloe and I, we have a real connection. I love her." The words, a dealination of war against his own wife, hung in the air. Alina flinched as if struck. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. It was Chloe who saw this as her moment of victory. Thinking Bella's story was merely a warning, not a verdict, she pressed her advantage. She placed her hand over Eric's. "And I love you, Eric," she said, her voice full of saccharine sincerity. She then looked at Alina, her expression a mask of pity. "Alina, I know this must be difficult, and I'm truly sorry for your position. But you must see that Eric and I are meant to be. We want to build a future together. Once the baby is born, Eric has a very generous proposal to ensure you and the child are comfortable. You won't have to worry about a thing." There it was, the entire grotesque plan laid bare on the mahogany table. They weren't just having an affair. They had planned the divorce, the settlement, the tidy disposal of her. They had discussed the fate of her and her unborn child as if it were a business merger. The blood drained from Alina's face. The room seemed to tilt. But then a white-hot rage, purer and stronger than any emotion she had ever felt, surged through her. Her back went ramrod straight. She looked not at Chloe, but at the man she had once loved, the father of her child. "A proposal," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You sat down with your mistress and drafted a proposal for how to get rid of your pregnant wife. You discussed the price tag for your own child. Alina, be reasonable." Eric snapped his composure, finally shattering. "This is the best way. For everyone. It's clean. Civilized. Civilized." Alina's laugh was a sharp, bitter sound. "You bring this woman," she gestured to Chloe without looking at her, "into my home. You sit her in your mother's chair, and you have her announce my dismissal as if I'm a member of the household staff you're letting go. And you call it civilized. No, Eric. This isn't civilized. This is monstrous." She pushed her chair back and stood up, her body trembling with adrenaline. She held the gaze of every person at the table. "You want to talk about what shines, Chloe? Let me tell you what shines. The love a mother has for her child. The commitment of a vow. The strength it takes to carry a life inside of you while your world is collapsing. You wouldn't know anything about that. You are a cheap, glittering imitation of a woman, and you are welcome to him. He is just as hollow as you are." Turning to Eric, her voice dropped, laced with ice. "As for your generous proposal, you can keep it. You will not buy my silence, and you will not buy my child." She stood there magnificent in her fury, and her pain, the queen of a kingdom under siege, finally launching her counterattack. Eric stared at her, genuinely shocked, into silence. He had expected tears, hysterics, a quiet retreat. He had never seen this Alina before, the one with steel in her spine. Chloe looked from Eric to Alina, her smug confidence finally cracking, revealing the panicked ambition beneath. But the most powerful person in the room had yet to deliver her verdict. Bella Beaumont watched Alina, and a slow, genuine smile finally touched her lips. She had let the drama play out. She had seen everything she needed to see. Now it was time for the matriarch to act. The silence that followed Alina's speech was absolute. The air in the dining room was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. The flickering candles cast long, distorted shadows on the walls, turning the opulent room into a Gothic courtroom. Alina remained standing, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts, her hand instinctively protecting her stomach. Eric stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, a portrait of bewildered indignation. Chloe looked flustered, her carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces. Then Bella Beaumont moved. She delicately placed her napkin on the table beside her plate. The small, crisp sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. She turned her chair slightly, not to face her son or his mistress, but to look directly up at Alina. "Sit down, Alina," she said, her voice no longer cold or neutral, but imbued with a warmth and authority that commanded immediate obedience. "The evening is not over." Hesitantly, Alina sank back into her chair. Her eyes were locked on Bella, a dawning question in them. Bella shifted her gaze to her son. The look she gave him was one of profound, soul-deep disappointment. It was the look of a creator assessing a flawed and failed creation. "Murrock," she began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. "For years I have watched you. I watched you take the privilege you were born into, not as a responsibility, but as an entitlement. I watched you treat your business, your friendships, and ultimately your marriage as disposable commodities to be used for your own gratification and discarded when they no longer amused you. Mother." This is hardly the place Eric started, trying to regain some semblance of control. This is precisely the place Bella cut him off sharply. "You made it the place. You chose this stage, my dining room, to enact this grotesque little play. You wanted an audience, you have one. Now you will listen." She let her words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "You speak of your birthright. You believe this house, this legacy, this name is something you automatically inherit, like the color of your eyes. You are wrong. The Beaumont legacy is not a possession. It is a stewardship. It is a duty to be earned day after day through integrity, honor, and strength of character. It is about protecting the future, not indulging the present." Her eyes flickered to Chloe, a look of utter dismissal. "You thought you could waltz in here, Miss Day, with your bright smile and your borrowed diamonds, and lay claim to 100 years of history. You saw a weak man and confused him for a powerful one. A common and fatal mistake for women of your ambition." Chloe shrank back in her chair, all her practiced bravado gone, leaving only a pale, humiliated girl. Bella turned her attention back to Eric. "Tonight you did something I thought even you were incapable of. You brought shame into this house. You attempted to humiliate the mother of your unborn child, the one person who has shown you nothing but loyalty and grace in the face of your callous disrespect. You did not do this to be honest, Eric. You did this because you are a coward. You wanted to force Alina's hand, to make her life so untenable that she would simply leave, absolving you of your vows." She paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath. "You have proven to me beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are not a worthy steward of the Beaumont name. You are a liability to it." Bella then reached down beside her chair and lifted a rich burgundy leather portfolio onto the table. She clicked it open with a sharp snap. The sound echoed the breaking of Eric's world. "What is that?" Eric asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. As you know, Bella said, her voice turning clinical after your father's financial indiscretions. He signed controlling interest of the entire estate, including all properties, over to me. It was the only way to protect it from his folly. For the past decade, this house has been legally and immorally mine. I held it in trust, waiting to see if my son would grow into a man worthy of it. She slid a thick sheaf of papers bound in blue out of the portfolio. On the top was a cover sheet with bold lettering, Deed of Gift. Tonight, Bella announced, her voice ringing with clarity. I have made my decision. Eric leaned forward, a greedy, hopeful light returning to his eyes. He thought this was all a lecture, a theatrical prelude to him finally getting what he wanted. Mother. Bella slid the document across the polished surface of the table. It didn't stop in the middle. It didn't stop in front of Eric. It slid with perfect, unerring precision until it came to a gentle rest directly in front of Alina's plate. Alina stared at it, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. Eric's face contorted in confusion. What? What is this? What are you doing? Bella. Beaumont looked at her daughter-in-law, and for the first time, Alina saw genuine, unreserved affection in her eyes. A legacy, as I said, is about the future, Bella declared to the room. And the future of the Beaumont family is not you, Eric. It is the child that Alina is carrying. This house, this estate, and everything on it belongs to the person who will protect that future. It belongs to the one who has shown strength, dignity, and grace under fire. It belongs to the true lady of this house. She looked directly at Alina. The deed to the Beaumont estate is now in your name, Alina. It is yours, free and clear. I had my lawyer, Mr. Davies, finalize it this afternoon. It is irrevocable. The world stopped. Alina's hand trembled as she reached out and touched the document. It felt solid, real. It was an anchor in a raging sea. Eric shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. No! You can't. This is my house, my birthright. I am your son. His voice was a raw scream of disbelief and rage. You are my son and I love you, Bella, said her voice, now filled with a sad pity. But love does not blind me to the truth. You are a danger to this family's legacy. Alina is its guardian. The house chooses Eric, and today I helped it choose. She stood up, her regal presence filling the room. Alina is now the owner of this estate, which means she decides who is welcome here. She looked at her son, and then at the shell-shocked Chloe. I believe your dinner party is over. I suggest you take your guest and leave. Eric stared, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. He looked at Alina now, the silent, stunned owner of his entire world. He looked at his mother, the architect of his ruin. And he looked at Chloe, the catalyst, the glittering prize that had cost him everything. Her face was ashen. The dream had become a nightmare. You will regret this, he hissed, his voice venomous. No, Eric Bella replied calmly. You will. With a final strangled cry of rage, Eric turned, grabbed a stunned Chloe by the arm, and practically dragged her from the room. Their footsteps echoed down the hall, followed by the violent slam of the grand front doors. And then there was silence. In the vast, candle-lit dining room, 2 women remained, the old matriarch and the new one. Alina looked from the deed on the table to Bella's face. Tears finally streamed down her cheeks, but they were not tears of pain or humiliation. They were tears of shock, of release, and of a profound, overwhelming gratitude. Bella came around the table and placed a gentle hand on Alina's shoulder. "Welcome home, my dear," she said softly. "Welcome home." The slam of the grand front doors was a sound of absolute finality, a percussive end to an era. It was as if the house itself had exhaled, expelling a poison it had held in its lungs for far too long. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was vast and profound, a heavy blanket settling over the opulent dining room. It was a silence no longer filled with dread, but with a dizzying, uncertain potential. Alina remained seated, her body trembling with the aftershocks of the confrontation. Her heart hammered a frantic, decelerating rhythm against her ribs. She stared at the scene before her as if waking from a fever dream. The pristine white plates were now littered with the remnants of a meal turned to ash. A smear of wine stained the tablecloth where Chloe's glass had sat. Eric's chair was still askew, a silent testament to his violent, impotent rage. In the polished mahogany of the table, Alina could see a distorted reflection of herself, pale and wide-eyed, a stranger in a familiar land. She finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and with it came a single, choked sob. Then another. The dam of her composure, which had held fast through months of quiet anguish and the raw humiliation of the evening, finally broke. The tears were not the hot tears of fury anymore, but the cleansing tears of release. They streamed down her cheeks, washing away the fear, the loneliness, the feeling of being an unwanted guest in her own life. Bella, who had been watching her with a quiet, solemn intensity, moved with a grace that belied her age. She walked to Eric's abandoned chair and deliberately, methodically pushed it back into its proper place at the table, a small act of restoring order. She then went to the sideboard, poured a glass of still water, and brought it to Alina. Her movements unhurried and calm. She placed the glass on the table and laid a cool, dry hand on Alina's trembling one. The touch was an anchor. Alina's sobs slowly subsided, leaving her spent but lucid. She looked up at her mother-in-law. Her vision blurred her voice, a raw whisper. "Why, Bella, all this time, I thought you barely tolerated me. Why would you do this for me?" Bella did not answer immediately. She pulled out the chair beside Alina, the very seat Eric had occupied, and sat down, turning to face her fully. The formidable matriarch seemed to shed a layer of her armor in the candlelight. The hard, chiseled lines of her face softened with a weary wisdom. "Do not mistake me, Alina," she began, her voice low and steady. "In the beginning I did not do this for you. I did it for the child you carry. I did it for my grandchild. And I did this for the legacy my husband's grandfather bled and sweat to build." She paused, her eyes finding Alina's. "But tonight that changed. Tonight I am doing this for you as well, because you are the vessel for that legacy now. You have proven yourself to be its worthiest protector." She sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. Her gaze drifted to the imposing portrait of Robert Beaumont at the far end of the room. "I told you my husband brought a woman here once. I did not tell you the depth of the humiliation. He sat where Eric sat tonight. She sat where Miss Day sat. And I sat where you sat, silent and powerless. I had no control over the finances, no true authority. All I had was the name, and he was tarnishing it before my very eyes. I had to endure it. I had to smile at charity events and pretend I didn't know about the jewelry he bought her, the apartment he kept for her the way our friends whispered behind their hands when I entered a room. The confession was startling in its vulnerability. It reframed every cool, formal interaction Alina had ever had with Bella. It wasn't disdain. It was assessment. It was caution. I swore on everything I held sacred. Bella continued, her voice hardening with the memory that I would never allow that to happen again. I would never let a weak, vain Beaumont man jeopardize this family's future. After Robert's foolishness almost cost us everything I gained control. And I have been waiting ever since, watching Eric, praying he would grow into the role. But he only grew more entitled. Her eyes returned to Alina, sharp and clear now. I have been watching you too since the day he brought you home. I saw your quiet nature, your gentle spirit, and I confess I mistook your kindness for weakness. That is a failing on my part. I was looking for a fighter, a woman of iron. I did not realize there are different kinds of strength. Tonight, when you stood up to him, your voice shaking but unbroken, when you defended not just your own dignity, but the sanctity of your child, I did not see weakness. I saw the heart of a lioness. I saw a matriarch. The words spoken with such conviction settled into Alina's soul. Matriarch. It was a title, a mantle passed from one woman to another, not by blood or marriage alone, but by character. A wave of dizziness passed over her. The portraits on the wall no longer seemed to be judging her. In the flickering light, she imagined their stern expressions, softening into something akin to approval. The house itself felt different, the air lighter, the shadows less menacing. It was beginning to feel like home. Alina took a sip of water, the cool liquid steadying her. She looked at the blue-bound deed still sitting before her. It was more than paper. It was a key, a shield, a scepter. What happens now? She whispered the question encompassing everything Eric the baby, this new terrifying power. Now Bella said with a tone of absolute finality, Eric will face the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life. He will discover what it is to live without the Beaumont safety net. His personal trust fund, which I cannot touch, will seem like pocket money once he realizes he has to pay for his own tailored suits and sports cars and high-end apartments. He will rage. He will threaten. He will most certainly sue. She gave a thin, confident smile. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, is one of the most ruthless men in the state of Maine. He is already prepared. Eric will not win. She reached across the table and patted Alina's hand. You, my dear, will have your child in peace. You will raise him or her in their ancestral home. You will learn to run this estate. You will be the lady of this house in truth and in title. And I will be here to guide you for as long as you will have me. The offer was staggering, a promise of mentorship and alliance that Alina desperately needed. And Chloe. Alina asked the name, a bitter memory. Bella's smile turned grim. Miss Day will learn a valuable lesson about collateral. She hitched her wagon to a falling star. Eric's allure was never his own. It was the power and wealth this house represents. Mr. Davies informed me this afternoon that Eric had already leased a penthouse in the city and put a deposit on a new Ferrari, all on credit he assumed against his inheritance. An inheritance that no longer exists. I suspect Miss Day's affections will evaporate with remarkable speed the first time his credit card is declined. In the days that followed, the estate was transformed into a sanctuary. The locks were changed by a discreet security firm. Peterson, the house manager who had served Bella for 30 years, approached Alina with a slight formal bow. Your instructions, Mrs. Beaumont? he asked, his loyalty transferred as seamlessly as the deed. A new sense of order settled in. Eric's predictable tantrum began. The voicemails he left on Alina's phone were a pathetic symphony of narcissism. The first was pure venom. "You conniving bitch, you and that old dragon planned this. I'll see you in court. You won't get a penny." The next, likely after a conversation with his own lawyer, was a wheedling plea. "Alina, baby, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. It was just a stupid fling. You and the baby are my real life. We can fix this." The last was a drunken, rambling monologue filled with self-pity. Alina listened to them once on Bella's advice, then deleted them and blocked his number. It was all noise from a world that was no longer hers. A week later, Bella joined Alina for tea in the sunroom, a copy of the city's society pages in her hand. "I believe the Chloe Day chapter has officially concluded," she announced, a glint of amusement in her eyes. She recounted the story she'd heard from a trusted source. Eric and Chloe, at a restaurant he could no longer afford, had a spectacular argument when he confessed the full extent of his disinheritance. It culminated in her calling him a pathetic failure and throwing a $40 glass of champagne in his face before making a dramatic exit. He had been left to pay the bill, a final humiliation. As the weeks turned into a month, a new rhythm took hold. Alina's pregnancy progressed, her body growing heavier as her spirit grew lighter. She and Bella would walk through the winter bare gardens, discussing plans for the nursery in what was once a dusty, forgotten guest wing. Bella shared stories of raising Eric, tinged with a hindsight that was both loving and regretful, providing cautionary tales that Alina absorbed with quiet attention. In return, Alina shared her hopes for her child, a life filled with art and books and laughter, grounded in strength but also in kindness. One crisp spring morning, with the first buds appearing on the ancient magnolia trees, Alina went into labor. It was Bella who drove her to the hospital, her hand steady on the wheel, her presence a bastion of calm. She was there through the entire ordeal, not as a spectator, but as a coach. Her voice a soothing murmur through the crests of pain, her hand a cool cloth on Alina's forehead. That afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the hospital window, Alina gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair like her mother's, and eyes that held the wisdom of an old soul. When the nurse brought the swaddled baby to her, Alina looked at her daughter, and then at Bella, who was watching with an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. "I'd like to name her Elizabeth," Alina said softly. Bella's carefully controlled composure finally fractured. Her eyes welled up. "Elizabeth," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "After my mother." "Oh, Alina." A few moments later, a nurse helped place the tiny bundle into Bella's waiting arms. The matriarch looked down at her great-granddaughter, and the tears she had held back for a lifetime seemed to flow freely. "Hello, Elizabeth Beaumont," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The future is safe with you." Watching them, the old matriarch and the new Alina felt a peace so profound it settled into her very bones. The scar from Eric's betrayal would always be a part of her story, a reminder of the fire she had walked through. But it was no longer an open wound. It was a mark, a survival of transformation. She was not the scorned wife or the abandoned victim. She was Alina Beaumont, mother to Elizabeth, Lady of the Estate. She was the unexpected, unbreakable guardian of a legacy and the founder of a new one. The house had chosen, and in doing so, it had given her back to herself. It had set her free. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a cheating husband getting his comeuppance. It's a testament to the quiet strength that resides in those who are underestimated. Alina walked into that dinner as a victim, but through her dignity and courage, she walked out a queen. And Bella Beaumont proved that a true matriarch doesn't just protect a bloodline. She protects the values that give that bloodline meaning. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest betrayals pave the way for the most profound transformations. What would you have done in Alina's shoes? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and we love hearing your perspectives on these incredible stories of justice and drama. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength overcoming deceit, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next real-life drama we bring you. Thank you for listening.